My webcam is not working, but let me go ahead and share my screen. There's a blog post up. I put the link in the chat where you can find the slides. I will fix the resizing issue on the slides, but there's a link there where you can get to the full slides. So you can sneak ahead if you want to, or just go ahead and join me live for Supercharging Development Productivity. You more productive. If you have any chats or any tips that you want to add in the to the conversation, feel free to include them in the question panel and you can share them out to everybody else. But this is going to be, I think, a lot of fun, a lot of great tips in here. Our agenda is literally just supercharged development productivity tips, tools and techniques and hints and such. So thanks everybody for joining today. I actually reached out to some of the MVPs in our community and asked them for their top tips. And wow, I learned a lot. I got a lot of great tips from our MVPs and I've compiled them here for you today. And actually probably about as many MVPs as were able to provide tips. I had other MVPs saying, oh, I'd love to. This is a great topic. I've got a ton of tips, but I just am too busy right now, which I appreciate because I know all the MVPs are always super busy doing things. So we'll have to revisit this again in the future, maybe through a blog post or something along those lines. But with that, let's get started. Tip number one is use Delphi or C++ Builder, I suppose. Sorry, if you're a C++ developer fan, C++ Builder developer, I apologize. I don't mean to be languageist. I'm not sure what the term would be. Delphi, I prefer Delphi, and frankly, most of the stuff we're going to share works in C++ Builder as well. But I tend to favor Delphi, and if that bothers you, I apologize. If you can see past my limited vocabulary, then I appreciate that. But the reality is C++ Builder and Delphi are both super productive. They make developers more productive. I have a story I want to share. Oh gosh, why can't my webcam work? I always feel like you need to be able to see me while I'm talking. Oh, there we go. You see just my green screen because technology. Woo! So I was doing a presentation. I want to say it was like XE5, XE6, and I was in front of a group of developers. There's probably about 30 developers in the room, and I'm going through showing about how you can build Android applications and how easy it is. Oh, look, here we put the camera component down and we're taking pictures, and oh, now we'll share it to social media, and just a lot of the same demos you've probably seen before in the past with Delphi or C++ Builder. And there's a developer in the front that's just kind of sitting there with his arms folded, and he's looking more and more like frustrated. And I'm starting to I'm like, what's going on? Everybody else seems to be really following along, but this guy's just looking frustrated. I'm about to ask him, and he finally ask him what's going on if he has a question or whatever. And he raises his hand. And he's like, I've been an Android developer for a while now, and came here to learn about Delphi, and I see you running these making these demos, but I don't see you writing a whole lot of code. What's going on? And everybody else in the room starts to smile, and I'm like, oh, well, that's what Delphi does. Is it makes it really productive and really easy to get things done. And I said the great thing is, and I went through and showed how you can dive in and see all the code that comes in that component you dropped on the form, and you could make your own components and you can make your own code. But the beautiful thing is you don't have to get bogged down in the code. There are components for everything. They're super reusable, super powerful, and you can be super productive and get things done quickly. So yeah, it was kind of cool, kind of fun. Just a great opportunity to talk about the productivity advantages of Delphi. If you're not familiar with it, or if you're only using Delphi, you forget how good it is. But if you're not familiar with it, it can make a huge difference. I did want to call out, actually some other people called out some books in particular, but there's the website delphi-books.com. You can go out to and find a huge selection, fairly regularly updated, of Delphi books. It's got new releases, most recently added, just tons and tons of great options out there for finding books about Delphi. There's a lot of books coming out about Delphi frequently, actually. Yeah, some great new ones here. So go check that out if you're not familiar with delphibooks.com. So Marco sent me a link to his blog post here, and I didn't get all of them embedded in here, and some of them are repeated later, but I did want to include his link to his blog post here, gdksoftware.com, knowledge-based Delphi tips and tricks, where he goes through some various Delphi tips and tricks. So definitely go check that out. He also has a link to some books that he breaks down and talks about as well for that he recommends. Just glancing at the questions here. All right. First up, Dieter is sharing Model Maker Code Explorer. So if you're not familiar with Model Maker Code Explorer, it is one of it's one of a core. I'm trying to think how to phrase this. It is a Delphi IDE add-in that has been around for a while, very popular, very powerful. There's GXperts, Model Maker, and CImpact that they do have some overlap between them. I know some people that use multiple together because there are things that they do uniquely themselves, but at the same time, they sometimes do have overlap. So sometimes you want to pick just one that you're using. But let me see if I make this full screen. I already have full screen. Why is it still my tabs on there? Oh, well. Anyway, he recommends Model Maker Code Explorer. This is a really powerful tool for working with Delphi code. It gives you a lot of great new refactorings, code searchings, and stuff like that. So definitely check that out if you're not familiar with it. There is a webinar, and I believe it's in German because it's in Code from Code Germany. So if you know German, check that out. If you don't, you can watch it and probably, actually, you might be able to get the subtitles translation. I didn't even think about that. Dieter specifically calls out the book Code Faster in Delphi by Alistair Christie, and he did a session at DelphiCon as well, and you can learn more about it on his website. If you're not familiar with Alistair Christie, go out to code or learndelphi.tv, and he's got tons and tons of videos, free videos on programming in Delphi, and lots of tips and techniques. Actually, I had a few people that recommended checking out either Alistair's book or some Alistair's webinars or whatever. But great resource there. And he recommends using components. He says, so I think this is a great tip here, is to go out and find some new component libraries and spend a little time learning how to use them. So he calls out a couple here, specifically Virtual Tree View, the Raise components are now Canopta Signature VCL controls, Spring 4D. Use and what they recommend, and yeah. So this is might be an odd one. It's kind of a 2-for-1 here. Is PyScripter. If you're not familiar with PyScripter, it's the lightweight, full-featured open source Python IDE. It's written in Delphi, and it's kind of inspired by Delphi. So if you're coming from Delphi, you definitely feel fairly at home or familiar with it. Uh-oh. My microphone. Okay, can you hear me now? The audio just stopped. So Stefan's asking if there's a Spring for D for Dummies introduction. So there was, if you go to our web or YouTube channel, I was going to put this link in here and then forgot. Spring for D. I think there is a so Nick Hodges did a session here on dependency injection with Spring for D specifically, but there we did a webinar with Stefan Glenke. No, I spelled it wrong. That's right. Why can't I find it? I will have to look that up afterwards. We did a webinar on Intro to Spring for D, and it should be on our website. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing it. I'm not sure who this is, but that's not related. So there was a webinar we did previously on Intro to Spring for D, which I'll have to dig that up. But anyway, Python, PyScripter. So this is a 2-for-1. If you're not familiar with PyScripter, it's a great Python IDE. If you're like, wait a second, I don't use Python, well, check it out. Because two things. One is that learning to use a different programming language is a great way to just kind of shake up the way you think about programming, especially if you're like a single. For the longest time, I only did Delphi. If anybody wanted to say why use another programming language, I would tell them why they're wrong. But since then, I've learned that there's value in knowing multiple programming languages, and I think a good developer should have multiple languages under their belt. And I think Python's a great supplemental language to add. It is it's actually designed with a lot of the same ideas as Delphi, and it's a scripting language, so that kind of gives you some different ways to approach programming and different things you can do. And so there's the Python for Delphi bridge, which lets you combine Python into your Delphi applications. We've done a couple webinars on that topic, and just it lets you tackle problems from different directions with different tools. So check that out for sure if you're not familiar with Python or PyScripter, that you might be surprised. You might learn some things. You might decide to start using Python in your development stack, or at least it might influence the way you think about programming and tackling tasks. Is there something similar to PyScripter but for PHP? Not familiar with anything right now. I know there's been some PHP IDs in the past. Actually, I will talk about UltraEdit here in a little bit, and that might be the solution you're looking for. So David Cornelius recommends has a few tips here. Use the so environmental consistency. This is actually, he has a blog post on this, so check out the blog post. But he talks about the importance, and actually I learned a lot from these tips that came from the MVP. So two things I learned. So I'm going to turn the webcam on because I have a little aside here. Two things I learned big time here. One of the reasons I asked MVPs is because I'm like, I'm not in the trenches writing code as much as I used to anymore, as much as I'd like to be, unfortunately. So I thought I didn't want to give tips that were outdated. What I was surprised to discover is a lot of the tips that came from MVPs validated some of the tips I was thinking about. So that was a plus. I'm not as outdated as I thought I was. But I also learned a lot of things that I was like, I didn't think about that, or things I was like, oh yeah, I knew about that, but had forgotten or hadn't thought about it or wasn't following it consistently. And this is one of them, is I move between virtual machines and different computers a lot. I have a Mac with an ARM CPU and a Windows computer with an Intel CPU, and I move between those two computers, physically separate computers. On the Mac, I'm running Windows 11 in a VM, so Windows 11 ARM, just because I like to experiment to see how things work on there, but also for tackling, Mac OS ARM related things or iPhone related things, and then the Windows computer on there, and then I have other VMs as well. And changes in environmental consistency really throw me off, and I just have not taken the time to really synchronize those up. So he talks about the importance of that, synchronizing that across different platforms, across virtual machines, etc. Check out his blog post there. So he said one of the things he talks about, he maps a drive V on every development machine as the root path for all projects. It shortens time looking around for projects and such. And then uses drive syncing tools and stuff like that. So check that out. Definitely something to think about and consider if you find yourself moving between development platforms or virtual machines or whatever the case may be. Additionally, it's also could be useful if you have a team of developers to implement some of these for the team so that they have some of the advantages. So if somebody comes up with a tip or whatever, you can synchronize it across your team. Bruce McGee has a great tip here: automate your builds. And this is so important because when you automate something, not only do you improve the performance of it because it can be done automatically, for example, automate, but it also removes the potential for human error. It takes out those steps that you have to remember to do manually and does them repeatedly, so you have a repeatable, deterministic outcome. So automate, use MS build scripts. Here's an example he has here. Really easy to set up. You can find information in the doc wiki on there. And as he points out, you can even automate builds that use multiple versions of Delphi. And Bruce has one more productivity tips: don't use with. A lot of people have chimed in about this. Generally speaking, it's considered not a good idea. So if you are using with, maybe reconsider that. David I's top 10 tips, which I am not going to read through all of them, but I will touch on a couple of them. Write less code. That's one of the great things about Delphi or C++ Builder with using components. He points out Alistair Christie's videos here. This is a big one: is think about what you're working on. Don't just, so I'm mentoring some developers, and a lot of developers I talk to will like watch videos and read books, but never write code. And I'm like, you gotta write some code, but at the same time, it's really important to think about what you're writing before you start writing. So there is writing test applications, things you know you're going to throw away, things you know are not going to be production or even hint at production. Writing code can be a way to think about things, but you really want to think about how to tackle a problem. So if you're going in to fix a bug or add a feature, think about how you're going to do that. Think about what the impact's going to be and think about the side effects and stuff. Make sure you get a good night's sleep. This is something I'm working on. It makes a huge difference, something I'm working on getting better about. Oops, I scrolled up. And use modern developer tools. This is a great one here as well, which brings us to back to using Delphi again. So there's David I's tips. They're all in the blog post there. Check it out. And then David I also gave me a list of links to websites on productivity tips that he likes. So those are in the slides on the blog post as well. So you can go check those out and go out and read those tips there. What is the best tool to install components in an automated build? I'm not sure I understand your question, Otomar. So if somebody else has any suggestions on best way to automate installing components during your build process, feel free to chime in the chat. So Eric Van Bilsen from Gridgey has some suggestions here on keyboard shortcuts. This is the big one here. If you're, years ago, I was working for a computer company doing tech support, and during the training, they really drilled the importance of keyboard shortcuts, and it was almost to the point that like we do things and they would like get after us for using the mouse. We'd say, "Oh, you're a mouser." So I mean, mice or pointing devices are great. They're very useful for when you use them, but as much as possible, try and use keyboard shortcuts. If you find yourself using the mouse, if you're like, I don't remember how to do this, and you go to the menu, figure out what the keyboard shortcut is. If you hold the Alt key, it'll usually underline it, or there might be a direct keyboard shortcut right next to it. Or actually, I meant to put it in the blog post. I'll add it in the blog post, a collection of keyboard shortcuts as well. So get to know keyboard shortcuts. Here's a few great ones here, but it makes you more productive in getting things done because you don't have to switch to the mouse. So John pointed out, number 6, take breaks away from the keyboard to rest, reflect, think, and give your eyes a break. Yes, that is a great one. Very important as well. I agree. Some more keyboard shortcuts here. This record macros is huge. I love this one, and also get a keyboard with programmable keys. And I have the same. Turns out I have the same keyboard Eric has. It's a split. I can't remember the name of it, and I'm not. It's wait, no, shoot, I'm on the wrong computer, and I don't have it right here. It's a split keyboard that's programmable that you can record macros in. But gosh, if you think about when you're doing something, if you think about it, you're like, oh, I'm repeating things. If you can record that really quick with in the IDE Control-Shift-R, or if you have a keyboard that'll do that, record a keystroke, and then boom, play it back, play it back, play it back, play it back, and you can get really speed things up if you find yourself doing something repetitive. I forgot the G experts had the ability to record multiple macros and save them. That's really cool. And then he talks about column select mode, and Ray Konopka actually also talked about column select mode. He has a blog post about that. So if you want to read more about column select mode, you can go out to Delphi by Design and read the column selection trick blog post by Ray. But it's a great way to, again, it's kind of tackling code from a different way so that you can do be more productive, get more done. And Eric had a little video here showing some of the keyboard shortcuts in action. So I was going to play that video as I just scroll here to see if there's any. Oh, wait. I just thought of, I think, the answer here. Yeah. So I just put a link in for, in response to Otomar's question, to Boss, which is a open source package manager out on GitHub that makes it really easy to manage packages and load components and stuff like that. So check that out. It's really, really cool, actually. I recommend it. And always when I do this, I was always like, oh, I can't believe I forgot to include that. And that's one of those things. It's like, I can't believe I forgot to include that. Okay, cool. Thanks, Eric, for putting that little video together. That's great. And then he has a few blog posts. If you're not following Eric's blog posts out on Gridgey, they always have great stuff out there. So definitely recommend it. This is a great one here. Decrease your build time by precompiling common libraries to DCUs. I run into people a lot that I've mentioned this to, and so I'm glad Eric put together a blog post about this, because frequently they're like, oh, it takes forever to build this because we have 1,000 units. I'm like, I mean, yes, you can do that every time, but precompile some of those can make a huge difference. Improve compilation speed, mobile compilation speed, and compilation speed in general by adjusting project options. So go check those out. Great tips. Thanks, Eric, for that. And then this one's check out DelphiCon. If you missed DelphiCon, you can go out and catch the replays. There's a playlist up on YouTube as well. Specifically, I'm going to call out Nick Hodges did a session, Delphi Best Practices, top 7 things you should be doing. And in there, I can't actually, in the Q&A, I know with came up, but I can't remember if he said don't use with during the main part of the presentation as well. So I mentioned this earlier, but I wanted to talk about this in detail. UltraEdit, if you're not familiar with UltraEdit, it actually was recently joined the IDERA Developer Tools family products. We don't currently have any big Delphi integrations, but I've been talking to Ben, he's the guy in charge of UltraEdit, and we actually have a meeting to talk about some of those things and more, but I have a few ideas on ways we can really integrate this more in with Delphi to make it even better. But my experience has been is that all developers, and maybe not, but everybody I've talked to has another editor that they use. Visual Studio Code's gotten really popular recently. I used to use Notepad++ all the time, but we usually have some other editor that has syntax highlighting and some, programmer type features in it. Well, UltraEdit is a great candidate for that, and it's actually part of a full suite, Ultra suite, I guess, or they have actually I think Ultra Studio includes all of these, but UltraEdit is the main editor. Then there's Ultra Compare, Ultra Finder, and Ultra FTP, which these, if you don't have utilities to do that already, definitely good to have something like that. Maru just commented UltraEdit edit customer since 2009. Yeah, we did I think just during DelphiCon we did a session on UltraEdit, and there were a few people that came up and like, I've been using UltraEdit forever. It's amazing. So I actually used UltraEdit a long time ago, like back when it first came out. And the reason is I had this one program, this one data file that was huge, and I had to make a change at the bottom of it. And I was actually, I tried a few different editors and none of them could open it. I don't remember how big it was, but here they say, when you have to edit a 10 gigabyte file, UltraEdit's like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. It technically doesn't have a limit for how big a file it can open. But I guess, you have to say, they say 10 gigabyte or more, I think, on the website, but it will open any size file and you can jump to anywhere in the file and make the changes you need to make and save it out. It was getting so bad, I was actually going to write a program to make this change before I discovered UltraEdit. And I was like, wow, this is great. So it's a lightweight, fast editor. It's not as bloated or heavy. So like I say, a lot of people have started using Visual Studio Code lately. I don't know about you, but whenever I have a Electron-based application on my computer somewhere, every now and then I'll forget about it and it'll be in the background. And all of a sudden I'm like, why is my computer getting slow? And I look at my CPU utilization and it's all of a sudden really high. And I go look, and it's that Electron application in the background's all of a sudden just been like, I'm gonna do something. And I don't know what happened, but it just gets really, really CPU intensive, even though it's not doing anything. So I don't know that I've had Visual Studio Code do that specifically, but there's other ones I've had, other Electron applications that do that. Electron includes a huge stack of Chrome, Node.js and stuff like that, so it can have unexpected things happen. I read a blog post a while back, someone saying that they had written the feature for Chrome to add support for the Xbox controller, so you can use an Xbox controller to play games through the browser. And they're like, why does my IDE, my editor, Visual Studio Code, need code to support the Xbox controller? So yeah, UltraEdit is really slim and fast and not bloated. So I really do recommend it. If you're not familiar with it, check it out. It has a lot of great features. For example, hex editing. You can go in and edit anything you want to, edit it by hex. It's just really, really cool. If you have a editor you're using already, check it out. It has syntax highlighting and all the features you expect for tons of languages, customizable and such as well. Oh, and it has like the Ultra Studio has GitHub support or Git integration, as well as other developer type integration things. So check that out. Julio has recommended some frameworks that they built at his company to improve productivity of the developers. And this kind of goes back to Dieter's comment earlier, is go out and check out some frameworks for components and see if they make sense for you. So there's a few of these here we're going to go through and look at, and I like these because each one is very tightly focused on a specific area in programming that I think could be added to a lot of applications. So the first one is Router 4D. It's a framework for creating routes between screens in Delphi, VCL, and FireMonkey applications, inspired by React Router. So check that one out there. So here you just can link between screens, move between screens. Safety 4D is so this is actually really important if you're doing something that has multiple users, which probably do, and you need to deal with security. And I've seen a lot of different ways to try and tackle this, and so it's pretty cool. Actually, they put this together, a role-based access control framework, because it's been re-implemented so many times. I've worked at places that has re-implemented this, and it is important. It's important to do right and important to have this sort of thing. So Maro is saying UltraEdit he has a lifetime license that he got, and he loves the column editor mode in UltraEdit. So great. Locale Cache 4D is a mini database with key value structure to perform local application data caching. This is I implement a lot of these. I've implemented over the years, and there's a certain amount of effort that goes into implementing it versus making it a reusable library. So I'm glad to see it's made a reusable library. This is really useful. This is a really useful thing. We had this huge application I was working on, and I implemented something like this, and it made it really, really useful for sharing data between different parts of the application as well. So very cool. And Bind4D, a framework for binding bind via attribute notation in form components, aims to facilitate the data transition between the view layer and the other layers of your system, automatically converting data from a form to JSON using notation, assigning values to components, performing field validation, dataset display configuration in a DB grid, and much more. So check that out as well. And SimpleORM, ORM's object relational mapping, if you're not familiar with it, it's a SimpleORM to perform CRUD on all databases supported by FireDAC. So you can just, if it's a FireDAC database, SimpleORM, and now you have an ORM gives you the ability to interact with a record in a database as if it was a Delphi object, which is really cool. That's one of the things sometimes feels weird to me, is that when you do field by name type stuff, well, now if I have a table here, and so by the way, it's in Portuguese, that has, if the table has a column ID, client, etc., then there they are right there as properties of an object. So it gives you that whenever I'm using SQL, I have to put it in quotes, a single quote, and write the SQL in there, or the field name or whatever. It breaks the flow, if you will. It takes you out of writing code, it feels like. It kind of breaks the paradigm. And so this lets you keep the paradigm, lets you keep everything as Object Pascal code. So it is in Portuguese, but he does have a YouTube channel you can go check out and see some of these in action. You might be able to get the subtitles to translate. Actually, I will talk to Julio and see if we can work on adding some translations to it as well. He does a lot of great stuff, so check it out if you're not familiar with him. Brazil is one of those Delphi hotspots. It's always so amazing to see all the great stuff coming out of Brazil. I actually missed going to Brazil for a few years now. I was down there fairly regularly for their conference, but things got weird and I haven't traveled in a while, which I missed. So Dahlia posted some productivity tips as well, and these are some things that we saw come up by other people too, but reduce distractions. I was just last night talking to my sister, so mentoring my nephew in programming, and I recommended he get a timer so he doesn't spend too much time go out and researching things. So that was the problem he had, is he'd spend the whole day trying to figure out how to do something and never actually write any code. And I said, get a timer and set the timer and only let yourself research for a while before you try something. And he said, well, I have my phone, I don't need a timer. And both my sister and I were like, oh, wait, that's not a good thing. So the problem I use two-factor authentication. And I'm always like, go to a login to website, and I'm like, oh, I got my phone out here and get my code. And I bring it up, and there's some notification or something on my phone, and I'm off for whatever. And then eventually I'm like, oh, dang it, what am I doing? I'm distracted. And I put my phone down, and I look back at the computer, and it's like, enter your two-factor authentication code. I'm like, oh, that's right, I got to do that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, now I know what happened. So reduce distractions. Figure out how to get rid of distractions. If your phone's a distraction, put it away. I turn off most all of my notifications. Made a huge difference. Definitely recommended. If your phone is a distraction, I know some phones you can put it in different modes where you can turn off things, other applications during certain times of day. That's important. Take breaks. This is a big one here, rubber duck or teddy bear. I cannot tell you how useful it is to have somebody else to explain it to, even if it is a rubber duck or a teddy bear. I use my wife. I always try and explain it to her, and she's like, I don't know what you're saying. I'm not a programmer. I'm like, that's okay. Let me explain it to you. And that helps quite a bit. I probably should quit annoying her. Paper and pencil, this is a big thing. It's amazing how often that makes a big difference, is switching to that different medium. So there's a blog post there. Go check it out for a whole bunch of more details on these. Stefan Neelan recommends IDE visualizers. And actually, if I remember correctly, Mithoff Software, if you have any of their components, which they have really generous free licenses as well for use, and good prices on them. They have a number of visualizers they just build into, but you can create your own visualizers. And so it gives you the ability to visualize something. So for example, right here, he's showing you can have a visualizer that visualizes a time value as the time. So you're not always, I should have written this one a while ago, because I can't tell you how often I'm hard coding time values like that. And then I'm like, do the conversion and try and figure out what it is. So it lets you see it. So you can make your own visualizers. You can visualize them, see them in the format they should be. John says the best phone mode is off. Yes. Live templates, add your own. So this, I'm really kicking myself because I made a ton of live templates a while ago, and then I've lost them. And so I need to go back and do this again. But this is a big thing. You have patterns you're repeating in your code that you're writing over and over again. Make a live template for them. And then you just invoke it with Control Space or Control J, type the whatever thing that invokes it. There's an identifier that invokes it, and it creates that template, and then you can tab between the different parts of it. So useful. Definitely, if you're not using live templates, go check them out. And then, as I don't know who it was, said, make sure you synchronize that between all your different development environments. Ian Barker talks about the Pomodoro technique, and he's talked about this before. If you're not looked into it, it's a really good productivity tip. And apparently, I've got too many tips. It looks like I'm going to run past top of the hour. I apologize. I'll try and speed it up a little bit here, but all the slides are available if you can't stay for the whole thing. But Pomodoro technique is a way that helps you focus on chunks of time, which is kind of what I was recommending for my nephew, actually. Maybe I should just tell him to use this. Ian recommends Tomato Timer, which is a free website for doing that. Ian is incredibly productive and gets a lot done, so I put a lot of weight. All the MVPs are, but I know Ian gets a lot done. I work with him a lot, and so I'm definitely like, okay, I need to be using this better, because clearly I need to be more like Ian. He says, what's so good about it? It's a brain hack which helps encourage you to really zone in on a task. It encourages you to take regular breaks, but manage breaks. That's a big one as well. Like sometimes my breaks get out of hand. And use to gamify your work. He uses 40-minute work sessions with 5-minute breaks. So check that out as well. Other tips, this is something I've gotten better about over the years working from home, because I've been working from home for a long time, is the my schedule kind of morphed into this continuous work thing. And I recently started trying to be more disciplined about that and having regular schedule about when I work and such. And that made a really big difference. So definitely encourage that. I also in the past used an audiobook when I was programming. Bad idea. He's right. Don't have anything, maybe music only. Actually, music is a really good idea, but don't have something else like an audiobook or talk radio or whatever. And take breaks, walk your kids, dogs, except take a break for yourself or whatever, and you'll be surprised how often you get things done or figure out things later when you're not looking at them. So Danielle has a collection of, and I'm not pronouncing his name right. He's Italian, and I'm terrible at pronouncing things, so I apologize. But he has a number of things here he's listed out. Typora. So I was not familiar with what a mermaid diagram was, so I had to go look. This is a mermaid diagram, and I've made these in the past, but I didn't know that's what they're called. So Typora is a markdown editor, which I do a lot of markdown editing. I was using Visual Studio Code, then I switched to UltraEdit, but I might add Typora back in for that. Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code, you have to load all these plugins to get Markdown working. UltraEdit, it just works. And it's got preview, boom, preview your Markdown. Typora as well has the preview built in. It's a WYSIWYG editor. It's cool. As you're editing the Markdown, you see the Markdown while you're editing it in Markdown, but then when you finish that, whatever you're editing, the link or whatever, then it renders it as you would see. That's cool. There's definitely something to be said for specialized tools like this. Even though I'm a big fan of UltraEdit, I probably will be adding this in here. I wasn't familiar with it. He says it's not free, but it is cheap. I didn't look at the price, but I'm definitely gonna check that out because that looks cool. And mermaid diagrams are very, very useful. Didn't know what they're called. Multi-commander. There's a number of these out there, but it replaces well, it doesn't have to replace, but it's an Explorer file manager like utility, like Total Commander, but this one's free. I can't remember if this one was written in Delphi or not, actually. A number of these were written in Delphi because, of course they are. Anyway, it's fast, maintained, full-featured, lots of plugins. It's a great way to be very productive in doing file things. Sometimes switching like from Explorer to something like this can be a bit of a effort to make that shift, to make that transition. But I found oftentimes I'm quite surprised or appreciate the effort when I do that, because even though it takes some effort to make that transition, it's worthwhile. It pays off. So check out Multi-Commander or a different one if there's something else you'd rather use, or there's some on Mac OS as well. I can't remember what they're called on Mac OS, but there's some Mac OS ones too. So John commented, if you're in a corporate environment, make sure you block out lunch and do not disturb time on your public schedule for coding. That's a really good point. Also, so Embarcadero, I work with people all around the world. And some people are only online when outside of my normal work hours. So it is important to block out, like, hey, at this time I'm done working, and take a break. But nothing that says you have to have that your work hours in a single block, but do block out time, put it on your calendar so people know when they can invite you to a meeting and when they can't. And frankly, if someone invites you to a meeting you can't attend, say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. If you're like, have some boundaries. I've been getting better about that as well, and it makes a big difference because you can get yourself overextended and you get nothing done. Juan says, Quitter for Mac is an application that closes automatically after a programmed time. It closes applications automatically. Oh, cool. So I should use Quitter so my Electron-based applications don't sit in the background sucking up resources. There probably is one for Windows as well. David Cornelius says, I've been using xyploiter, xyploiter.com for many years as a Windows Explorer alternative. And Saeed is looked ahead because the next thing we hear is everything. So I was really, I don't know why, but I was really hesitant to start using everything. And there are actually, so UltraEdit has a Ultra Find, I think it's what it's called, that will do something similar. And there is a couple other ones that do similar things to everything, but I keep using everything. It's free, it's really simple, but it is incredibly fast. And frankly, the Windows start menu, I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to the Windows start menu to find a program I want to launch that I know is on the start menu, and I type the program name in, and it's like, oh, you want to visit the website for that? And it's like, no, I want to run the program. So I choose everything to launch my programs now too. And actually, frankly, Mac OS has gotten just as bad as Windows has. I've gone to Spotlight on Mac OS and like, oh, this program's on my computer. And it's like, oh, we want to visit the website for it? And it's like, no, I know the program's on my computer. And I've actually gone and started to reinstall it before. So I'm like, oh, maybe I don't have it installed. Oh, no, it's installed. Spotlight just couldn't find it for some reason. I don't know why. So there is, I can't remember what the one for Mac OS is called that's similar to everything, but such an important, useful utility. Everything, check it out. Yes, Jason Chapman. Yes, yes, yes. So good, so good. This I wasn't familiar with, and actually I meant to mention AutoHotkey as well and a couple other similar utilities, but this is a Pythonic task runner. I need to dive into this in more detail because this was really intriguing to me, and I said it wasn't something I was familiar with. But you create tasks in your project root, and you define commands as Python functions. This goes back to, having another tool in your tool belt, and then you can, he's planning to write a Delphi task runner with the same approach, but it's hard to explain. Go check it out. Like I said, I'm trying to wrap my brain around it, and there's something about it. It's like, this looks really like what I need, but I don't quite understand what it is yet. But yeah, so I think I'm almost there. It says very easy to grasp. I didn't have a lot of time to look it over yet, but I will definitely be checking it out. And then he also recommended HTTPI, which is the curl of the third millennium. I have used a lot of tools to accomplish this that I have not liked, and I went and looked at HTTPI, and I'm like, oh, this is the one I've been looking for. So if you've ever had a situation where you're needing to reach out and call a REST service or talk to a HTTP site or whatever, download some code or whatever, this is the kind of utility you might want to use. Yes, Agent Ransack is another great one. The difference between Agent Ransack and everything, so everything is file name based, whereas Agent Ransack will look in the files, which is great. Yes, Asana is a great structured to-do list utility. Need to create a Delphi OS. I thought about it. I thought about it. George says, use everything regularly, would also recommend Agent Ransack. Yes. Yep. Huge. If you're using, yeah, there's such good things to use. Definitely check those out. ORM sends in Delphi parser. So Delphi parser is it's focused on, especially like if you're migrating like from BDE to FireDAC, it goes in and it can find these patterns of like, oh, this is BDE, replace this with FireDAC. It makes it easy to migrate legacy code, get rid of obsolete VCL components and move to newer components and stuff like that. Convert desktop applications using VCL to web using UniGUI. So it's like a more powerful search and replace, and I'm probably not doing it justice with that. But if you do find yourself with like an old code base you want to massage and move forward, definitely check it out. He has actually, I think he has some fairly generous free versions now that you can use as well, but there are paid ones as well. And I think they have for consulting on top of that too, which that can be a big thing. If you can manage, especially if you're a one-man shop, if you can manage delegating things or consulting to specific tasks out, that can make a huge difference to your productivity as well. But it says reduce 90% of the workload, and that's the thing, is this tool will go through and do like the repetitive thing is over and over again. It's like recording a macro, but more powerful, and let you do the hard part, do the big part, and then you can go through and pay attention to things you need to do to clean it up the rest of the way. You can find out more at DelphiParser.com. I thought I had some other slides. I'm not sure if I skipped things. So I actually, Sade just commented, WinMerge is top notch for file comparisons. I love Beyond Compare. So I was using WinMerge for years, and someone recommended Beyond Compare for me, and it's written in Delphi too, which it doesn't have to be rated in Delphi, but that just makes it all the cooler. Beyond Compare is really seriously awesome. It is paid, and there are some other paid ones out there, but from what I've seen of the paid ones, it is the best value. There are some more expensive paid ones that maybe have some features Beyond Compare doesn't have, but frankly, Beyond Compare's got so much, it really is amazing. Do I have a parser to recommend ADO to FireDeck? I think Beyond Compare does, or I'm sorry, Delphi Parser. I think Delphi Parser does that, but check it out. I'm not positive. Okay, so this is, I wanted to chat about as well, the future AI code completion. So story time, back in the Commodore era, when I had my parents got my Commodore VIC-20, I'm like, I want to be a computer programmer. And people were like, no, you don't want to be a computer programmer because soon computers will program themselves and you'll be out of a job. And I'm like, well, somebody has to tell computers how to program themselves, don't they? And over the years, computer programming has gotten more productive. It's gotten, there's all these things we've shown. I remember doing a presentation at a Delphi user group, and the code completion window popped up, and someone's like, whoa, what is that? I'm like, what? And they're like, that window there. I'm like, oh, code completion? They're like, I don't know, how did you do that? What is it? And it was, they had never seen it before. And I was like, oh, I just thought everybody used code completion. So there are so many things that we've taken for granted, these incremental changes over the years, that have really made us more productive, and made huge impacts on productivity. So AI code completion. This is big. We've seen a lot of big improvements with this recently, and it's getting a lot of attention. Is it the future? Actually, it's kind of already here, which I'm going to show here in a second. But it's not a panic, run for the hills, we're all going to be obsolete. We're still going to be, if you look at the examples of how to use it, while on the surface level, it seems like, oh my goodness, it's replacing programmers. No, you still have to your job is to act as the translator between the human requirements and the computer. And if you've ever done requirements gathering before, you know that talking to a subject matter expert or whatever the case may be, the person you're developing the software for, frequently it's like, oh, do this. And you're like, oh yeah, that's easy. That's 5 minutes. And they're like, oh, we really need this. And you're like, that's like 5 years of worth of effort, because they just don't have that comprehension of what things computers are good at, which is always changing. So as a developer, we're going to have a big influence on that. So I will comment here. John just commented, one thing that should be stressed is your programming environment is established by you. This can be hard to incorporate in a corporate environment. Pushback yeah, headphones, whatever it is you need to do. He says, I was a controls programmer at GE. I would never modify my programming environment, period. Yeah, make sure your workspace is in your environment, the way you program, that you do what works for you. Yeah, I worked with a guy that we'd frequently, you'd go to someone else's cubicle to talk to him, and he would hang a sign on his back that says, hey, I'm focused right now, don't bug me. And, oh, okay, now I know. So that's really, really important. John says, thanks in advance for the advances in Jim. The advances in programming are amazing. I started out punching cards. That's when I was in high school. I didn't start out punching cards, but when I was in high school, they taught us how punch cards work, just so we would appreciate how far things have come. And yeah, pretty awesome. So let's take a look at this real quick. I want this slide advance. Oh. Yeah, so there's my story. Oh, it's the funny thing was, so in 2017, I was in Tokyo for the Tokyo launch, and we were doing a press conference, and a member of the press said, why are you coming out with new developer tools? Developers are irrelevant because AI is going to make computers program themselves. I'm like, dude, that's what they told me in 1980, and it hasn't happened yet. It is happening. You definitely got to stay on top of things. You got to stay informed. Obviously, you're here, so you know that, but it is a fast moving situation. Okay, so first of all, there's tab 9, which is a IDE add-in for a number of IDEs, not for Delphi yet. I'm hoping, actually, I think there's some meetings and discussions about that. Shh, I didn't say that. Just to see if we can do that. But then here is a TMS Software's web core. They actually have some integrations in Visual Studio Code that can do this as well. So let me find. So here he's doing. Let me just. So you can go watch this video later. Oh, come on. Don't look like that. Sometimes YouTube's like auto 1080, and you're like, that doesn't look like 1080. So you're writing it. One of the ways you can invoke this is you can write a comment, and then the AI will look at your comment, and then will write the code for you based on your comment. Copilot, that's the one that's called. This is by Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI collaboration. And what it does is they went through all of GitHub and fed it into this machine learning neural network so that you could then find the code that you want. So here's an example of showing this, and so then you can autocomplete that for you, so you don't have to write as much code, especially regular expressions. I hate having to make regular expressions from scratch or tweak regular expressions, but to get a machine learning system that can say, oh, you want a regular expression that does email validation, here you go. So it's kind of like Clippy if you remember Clippy from Microsoft Word. So Clippy was annoying, but there is some, it could have been better. There was some research that showed they could have done better. I think they just did it wrong, but that's kind of Clippy 2.0 maybe, I don't know. So tab 9 though, the one thing that's cool about tab 9 is that video's still playing, is it lets you work with local code repository, and so you can have it pull, because a lot of people were like, there were some people that raised some concerns about Copilot because it's pulling from open source code, and they're like, well, there's a licensing issue. What if the code was GPL? What if the code wasn't open source licensed? This one lets you use your own code repository. So you're like, hey, I got a ton of code, I'm bringing new developers on, then this is can do that. It doesn't support Delphi yet, or the language of IDE, but it does have C++ support in here. Something to look at. This is one of those things that's evolving fast out in the cutting edge of programmer things. So definitely something to be aware of and think about to how this is going to impact us, because it is coming and it is going to make a difference. Actually, so I forgot there was another one I wanted to include in here. Let's see. Spring, is that it? Yeah, here it is. Co-screen. So this is really cool. This is a screen sharing collaboration application developed for developers, and it's built around being able to share your screen and then give somebody control of a single window. And then you can actually have multiple people, which is showing here, sharing windows, and they all show up together. And so especially maybe you haven't been working remote for a while and you're working remote now and you want to be able to collaborate with people, this is a great tool for that. I've used this. This is pretty cool. It's still available in early access, I guess. You have to request access for it, but I actually was going to do some webinars with it in the near future, but I haven't done that yet. Alan says regex buddy is a great for regular questions. Yes, I have to get on a wait list now. I'm already on the wait list, so I need to talk to them and see where they're at with that, because that was a really cool tool, and would love to show that off. I think that being able to collaborate with somebody that way was really neat. I did some tests with it. We'll be doing some more with that. Okay, so there we go. That was the tips I collected. Oh, Beyond Compare from Scooter Software. Compare, and the other one is AutoHotkey. Beyond Compare, Scooter Software, fantastic. I love so much. AutoHotkey is really great. It's a Windows only. It's not available for Mac, but there is. Its Automator on Mac is similar. AutoHotkey is way more powerful. I know a number of people that have been like, I use Windows because AutoHotkey. Those are great, powerful add-ons that you can use to make yourself more productive as well. AutoHotkey's got a little bit of learning curve, but very powerful. Lets you bind. The basic functionality of AutoHotkey is it can let you bind a key to whatever. So you can have, when I hit this key, it does something. But then AutoHotkey kind of grew beyond that, and now you can like make full programs in AutoHotkey, which is kind of crazy. And then Beyond Compare is, of course, I think the definitive comparison merging utility. It compares files, it compares folders, it compares images, you name it. It's awesome. Highly recommended. So there you go. That is the developer productivity tips and tricks. You can go out, hopefully this is the right link here. Yep, to the blog post where you can grab the slides, and I will fix the size of that slide and then also put in the some of the links and stuff there as well. But you can grab the slides, download them, get all those links and stuff. So thanks everybody for joining. Thanks to all the MVPs. And what is the browser you're using, and what's the new background site? So the browser I'm using Brave. I use Brave in Firefox, and these are Unsplash images, and I think the plugin is just like Unsplash Instant. Yeah, I think that's what it is. That just puts it in the new tab. I love that. I like it better than the some browsers like pop up like news, and I don't want to see news. If that goes back to distraction, right? If I open a new tab and it's like, ooh, check out the news. No, that's the distraction. So I like this because it's pleasant, and it's very occasion. There's been occasion that I've been like, oh, I love that image, and then I'll go click the info link to go get the or download it, right? Actually, usually that's what I do. I just download it and go on. But so occasionally it does distract me, but usually it's just a pleasant thing to look at when I'm opening a new browser tab. There's a similar one plugin for Firefox. Actually, I use Firefox probably more than Brave, but anyway. Yes, AutoHotkey can be used as GUI test automation. That is a really good point. You're welcome. Glad you enjoyed it. Good to hear. I appreciate that it was some useful tips in here. Like I said, I learned a lot from the these tips that were shared by the MVPs, especially a lot of great stuff in there. And we really just kind of scratched the surface on some of these. I feel bad that we didn't get to go into more details, but you can go check out the slides, go check out the links, and get more in there. So thanks a lot, everybody. Take care.